Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends where are you from. And thanks for inviting me here. In this session, we will talk about how we can extend Dataverse functionalities by using Azure Serverless platform. In particular, I want to put attention on how we can integrate external application by using a serverless platform, the Azure Serverless platform, and Dataverse. Let me just. Okay, now it's working. Very quickly, a bit about me. I'm an Microsoft MVP working in Azure and business applications. I mainly work in the Azure Staffs and Power Platform and Business Central fields. You can find me in these links if in case I'm not able to answer all the questions today. My goal for these 50 minutes is to talk a bit about Dataverse and how we can integrate Dataverse with a set of Azure services in order to extend its functionalities. Very quickly, just as an introduction, Dataverse for many. For who is not focused on the Power Platform, it can see something like just another database, something like a SQL or an Access database. But because it has tables, it has entities, it has columns, rows, relationship between tables, and so on. But database is much more than that. I love to define Dataverse as a business application layer on top of a SQL-like data. Why is this? Because normally Database permits you to securely store and manage data. These data normally are used from business applications, and Database relies on a data model based on tables. So it's very similar to what is in a relational database. Tables are a set of rows or records with columns where each column is a particular data type that you can define. You can create custom tables, custom columns, and so on. And why Dataverse is important? Because Dataverse today is the backbone of the entire Power Platform, and is the central focus point of the entire Dynamics 365 applications. It's very easy now to integrate a Dynamics 365 application with another by using Dataverse as a middle layer. Things that in the past was not easy to integrate. For example, I don't know, Business Central with Dynamics 365 for Sales, or Dynamics 365 for Sales with the Power Platform, something like that. Because in the past, we should rely on connectors, so data movement, connectors, custom connections, and so on. Now, we have the possibility to use Dataverse that is something like a backbone. So it's a middle tier that permits us to connect the different systems easily. A Dataverse is much more than a database, because in Dataverse, we can have security, so we can securely store and measure the data. We can have role-based access control that we can define for entities, for fields. Dataverse automatically includes a set of standard tables that normally covers a set of typical business scenarios. These standard tables are common between Dynamics 365 applications. But you can also create your own. So you can create your custom tables specific for a particular organizations. You can create solutions on top of Dataverse. You can export solutions, so you can apply application lifecycle management to a Dataverse solution, and so on. So it's much more than a database. And I always wanted to, when I talk about Dataverse, I always want to remind that Database is on top of something that is called Azure. And on top of Dataverse, there's Azure SQL. Database stores its data into Azure SQLs and Azure Storage. It uses Azure Cosmos DB for metadata. It relies also on Azure Data Lake and Cognitive Services. Dataverse has audit logs. These audit logs are stored in Cosmos DB. That is another NoSQL database available on Azure. Dataverse uses Azure Security for handling all the security part of the data store. And Dataverse is also extendable. And for extensibility, you can use different Azure services to extend the functionality of the standard Dataverse environment. And you can also rely on data lake or something like that to having data export and data analysis on top of Dataverse. So there's a word under Dataverse, and this word relies on a set of Azure services. Why we want to talk about Dataverse extensibility? Because data, I think that everyone here knows that in Dataverse you can create solutions, and normally in Dataverse the standard way is to create solution in a local way. So Dataverse has a lot of capabilities in order to create your own custom solution, define your custom logic, and create your custom applications. But sometimes these functionalities are not enough, and sometimes in a real world project, you need to integrate, for example, external applications. You need to notify external application if something changes on Dataverse, and you can rely on tools available in the platform. For example, Power Automate is a tool that permits, for example, to create workflows that reacts on changes in Dataverse entities. But sometimes this is not enough. Sometimes relying on Power Automate for that or on Logic Apps Core for that is not always the best choice. So that's why I want to know about how we can extend the standard functionalities. And when we talk about Dataverse extensibility, normally two interesting way of extending Dataverse is using its own web APIs. Dataverse permits you to expose entities with web APIs that relies on data. You can create in a local way web API in Dataverse and expose data as a data endpoint. This permits you to view and manipulate data inside Dataverse. And if you want more, you can create plugins. Plugins in Dataverse are something like DLLs, managed code, that you can register inside the Dataverse environment. They can be registered to run when some events occurs. And when the plugin is registered to occurs, the plugin starts an execution pipeline. This execution pipeline normally has 3 stages: pre-validation, pre-operation, and post-operations. That are something like events that starts when the execution pipeline of the plugin starts. And plugins in Dataverse can be configured to be executed synchronously or asynchronously. A synchronous plugin means that it starts immediately according to the operation or the event where it is configured to react. So it's something like a real-time execution. And the Dataverse environment, the plugin engine, when executes this asynchronous plugin, waits until it completes the execution. Or plugins can also be asynchronous. Asynchronous means that the plugins is not executed immediately, but it's executed via a system job. So it's something like it's queued and executed asynchronously. And this means that you can register an asynchronous plugin only to the post operation of an entity. Plugins are important because and powerful because with the plugins you can extend Dataverse, you can create business events, you can create also complex business events that can do quite all stuff you want, simply because a plugin is normally a DLL, a library that you can create, so you can use the entire power of the .NET framework, for example, in order to perform operations or calculations, data manipulations, and so on. So, saying that, the goal, my goal here is talk about how we can the scenario that I want to consider is, imagine that I have my Dataverse environment and I have an external applications. This external application runs on Azure, but it can also run everywhere. So we are not linked to Azure. It can also be on Amazon or something like that, AWS or something like that. We consider Azure today. So we have different applications, and I want to have Dataverse communicate to these applications that can be in the same tenant or also on different tenants, as in both ways. So I would like that when something happens in my Dataverse environment, and when I mean something happens, I mean not only entity changes, but a business process happens, an event in Dataverse happens, or something like that. I want to notify or send information to an external applications that can take the context of this event and do things. And I want also that an external application can write and perform operation on Dataverse. And when I say that, I mean an external application should be able to perform a business process on Dataverse, and maybe also expose its own data to Dataverse. So to do that, we have a set of possibilities. We can create webhooks on Dataverse. We can create service endpoints, and we can also use virtual tables for that. Why I say that? I'm not considering here a pure plugin, simply because plugins are a standard way to create add logic in Dataverse, but plugins sometimes does not permit us to create performance connection with the outside. So I want to focus the attention on how we can extend the standard functionalities of Dataverse with some cloud services. And these cloud services can be used by using webhooks and service endpoints. And also I will talk also a bit about virtual tables in terms of how we can expose external entities as virtual tables. So to start talking about that, here we are talking about extending Dataverse. So this means that we are embracing a road that is not always a low-code road, because we want to extend the standard functionality of what Dataverse and the Power Platform offers to us for doing integrations. So a tool that personally I think is useful for that is the Power Platform tools, a set of tooling available for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, for example, that permits us to create Power Platform solutions, permits us to create plugins and more. And this Power Platform tools are also useful for managing environments, to apply CI/CD to Power Platform and so on. A tool important, maybe one of the most important to extend the Dataverse functionalities is the plugin registration tool. And the plugin registration tool is a tool that permits us to create and register plugins, webhooks, service endpoints, and so on Dataverse. And when you have installed the Power Platform tools, you can run the plugin registration tool with the command from the command line, the command pack tool PRT, and it's a command that permits you to start the plugin registration tool. I will use the plugin registration tool for extending the functionality of Dataverse with the Azure services. So the focus here is I want to extend standard Dataverse events because I want to extend these Dataverse events to external applications. And for doing that, we can have two possible ways. The first is using webhooks, as the second is using Azure Service Bus integrations. What are the difference of these two types of usage? Webhooks from Dataverse are useful when you want to create synchronous processing. So this means that I want an operation that starts immediately when something happens on Dataverse. So an entity creation, for example, a business process that does an action or something like that. So if I want to have a process that immediately starts, so the external into the external application, webhooks are a reliable way. This when a webhook is triggered from Dataverse, the transaction starts, and the transaction is all the entities is inside the transaction. The transaction fails if the process of it from the webhooks processing from the external service is not performed. So it's quite reliable also for that. And instead, a service bus integration is useful when instead of real-time integration, you want high scale. So what you want to decouple your Dataverse environment from the external applications when you can have multiple subscribers, for example, that needs to consume a Dataverse event, quite common scenarios, or also if from Dataverse, you want to expose different events to external application, and external applications must be able to subscribe to only some events. So Service Bus is useful also for that, because you can, for example, publish events from a Dataverse environment. Simply speaking, you can react to account creation, customer creation, or I don't know, invoice or sales order posting in Dataverse, if you have something like that, or lead creation, opportunity creation. And Dataverse can raise these events, save these events to Service Bus, and then different applications can subscribe to this Service Bus and retrieve only the events that they want. So, for example, an application, if I have a CRM application, maybe I'm interested to account creation, I don't know. And if I have an ERP application, I'm interested to when someone saves an order on Dataverse or CRM or something like that. So Service Bus is in my opinion, quite useful if you have large-scale applications you want to scale, and you want reliable transactions. So we'll see this in actions. the first case that I want to show is the webhooks scenarios. So webhook scenario means that I want to extend Dataverse functionalities to external applications, and I want that this external application reacts immediately to a Dataverse event. So Azure Functions are one of the best way of create code in the cloud. This code is exactly can be exactly the same code that you can write inside a Dataverse plugin, but in a lot of scenarios, it has a lot of sense to offload the plugin logic into a separate component in order to reduce the load on Dataverse. So this means that instead of creating a plugin that contains a business logic that calls an external application when something happens on Dataverse, I can put this business logic outside, so in an Azure function, and from Dataverse triggering a webhook to the Azure function endpoint that simply pass the context of the Dataverse, and from this I can do my actions. So what I can do here, and later we will see, I can create an Azure function, an HTTP trigger Azure function. Here I call it Dataverse Webhooks Handle. This is a simple HTTP Azure function, HTTP triggered Azure function. When this Azure function is published on Azure, I have an endpoint, and this Azure function, without doing nothing, so with the standard template, it's able to receive a JSON object in post, and you can react to this. This is the context of the event, and you can do what you want. So this is only the first point. The scenario is I want to react to events from Dataverse, so I create an Azure function that is listening to Dataverse event, and then on Dataverse I can use the plugin registration tool to register a webhook that calls our newly created Azure function. And to do that, I use the slides here because doing that live is quite time consuming. So the steps are: I open the plugin registration tool. I register a new webhook. When you register a new web, click on register a new webhook, you need to provide details of the webhook that you want to register. And from here, I can take the Azure function URL, and the Azure function URL normally has this format. So it's name of the function app .azurewebsite.net/API/function name and your function key. You can copy the function URL and place it into the value section of the webhook registration string, and then remove the code. So this means that the webhooks registration has something like that, the endpoint until your function name, and then in the authentication you can use Azure Active Directory, or here I'm using the code, the webhook key. You can place that here. Then when you save, you click on save here. A webhook listener is creating in your Dataverse environment, and when a webhook listener is created, you need to register a step. So you right-click and click on register a new step. And when you register a new step, you need to select the entity that you want to consider. Here, for example, I consider the account. And you need to select also the event on the account event that you want to react. For example, the creation of the account. Give it the name of the step. You can select if it runs asynchronous or synchronous. In this case, I want synchronous because synchronous means that it's event that is immediately triggered. And if it's synchronous, you can select the event pipeline stage of execution. So if pre-event, post-event, here I'm creating the post operation because I want to react when the account is saved. So it's a post of the actual or the create operations. So click register a new step, and that's all. You have created a webhook that when someone creates an account, a signal is sent to your Azure function endpoint, and you can react. And what happens is that when something if, for example, here I created 2 accounts in Dataverse, and 2 events are sent to my Azure function. And just to show this in action, I have the Azure function is quite easy. I don't know if you are familiar with. Let me zoom a bit. If you are familiar with the Azure function, but as you can see, this is an HTTP triggered Azure function called Dataverse Webhook Listener. This Azure function supports get and post, but it's up to you only to support, for example, post. And here I'm doing nothing differently than simply reading the object that the event sent to me. So here I'm retrieving the object, and I'm also printing some details. But the most important part is here is that here I have the JSON object. So this is the request body. It contains the JSON object that the event sends to me. So I know the entity, I know what happens in the entity, and something like that. And I can do informations, and I can do actions. So in this case, I'm only printing, but I can do informations. So the Azure function is, let me go here. The Azure function is deployed on Azure. So I have the Azure function running in my, sorry, let me zoom a bit because in this way I'm not able to show all. Okay, I have the Azure function running here, and if I now the execution count is 0, but if I, for example, go, let me go here. If I open my database environment and I, for example, select tables and account, because I work on account. I have an empty account table. I create a test account. It's saving. When the data is saved, an event is sent to my Azure function with the context, so with the details of the account that I have created. And it's not immediately to see that, but I will go into this screen later because I want to show you that the execution is triggered. This event, I'm not enable application insights. With application insights enabled, it's immediately to see the events that is sent to the Azure function. But wait some minutes and these events will appear here. So my Azure function has immediately retrieved the execution of from Dataverse, has received the data. So you can see here that something is happening, but time gives Azure a bit of time to refresh this. Sorry, not restart, but refresh. And you will see that an execution count will happen. I will go back to this screen just to show you that the event is sent to Dataverse. So this is for the synchronous way, and the synchronous way means that it's real time. An event is sent in real time when I have saved the account, and the Azure function receives the event, and I can have all the context, all the data from Dataverse to do something. Sometimes the real-time way is not the best way to do that. Sorry, not restart, refresh, come on. Okay, now you can see that the execution is sent and I have received my my event from my Dataverse environment. And as said, I don't want always real-time execution always. So sometimes I want, especially in big scenarios, I prefer to have an asynchronous way. And an asynchronous way means, in many scenarios, exposing integration steps that publish messages to service bus. Dataverse has these possibilities. You can register integration step that publish message to service bus to a service bus queue when an event occurs in Dataverse. And you can define conditions when they cause the messages to be processed and context that you want. How to do that? The first step is to create a service bus entity. And a service bus is a service on Azure that can be seen like an advanced queue. So you can create the Dataverse entity, the service bus entity. And when you have created the service bus entity, you can go on queues and create a queue. When you have creating a queue, you need to give it the name. You can also select the dimension of the queue or the time to leave of the message. This means that when how much the message can be lived into the queue. When you have created a queue, you need to create what is called a shared access policies. And the shared access policies permits you to create a key, a connection string for your queue, and you will use that to create the service endpoint in Dataverse. This means that when we have set up the Azure resources that we need to again use the Dataverse plugin registration tool to configure the endpoint. This means that I can open the plugin registration tool, and now when connected to my Dataverse environment, I can register a new service endpoint. In this case, not a webhook, but a new service endpoint. When you register a new service endpoint, a new screen happens. It asks you a connection string, and you can place it a connection string of your service bus entity. Then you can, when you have filled the connection string, the next step prompts you with the details of the connections. All are automatically retrieved from the service bus entity that you have created. You only need to fill the queue name. So where the messages that Dataverse will send are sent from the Azure queue, from the Azure Service Bus, and also the parameter of the connection authentication. When you have set up that, you have a new service endpoint created on the Dataverse environment. And now, when you have created what is called the service endpoint, we have a connection between Dataverse and your service bus queue. But now you need to register the event. So when Dataverse needs to send an event, a message to that queue. So right-click this, and you create a new integration step. I use the same sample here, so when an account is created. So what you need to do is register a new step. And here you need to select what is the event that triggers the the event. I will go directly to the screen. So you need the entity. I want to database send me informations when an account is created. Database automatically send this information to this Azure Service Bus queue because it's what I'm creating in the service endpoint. And the important here is that if I use the service bus, you need to select the execution mode as asynchronous because it's an asynchronous operation. So it's not executed in real time, but it's executed in a asynchronous way. And if you select asynchronous, remember that automatically the post operation is selected here. And if you are in development mode, like in this case, you can also flag this because it means that the async operation if executed is deleted from the trace. So you can register a new step, and when the step is registered, if you go to settings in your Dataverse environment and advanced settings in the system jobs, you can see that an integration step is executed successfully. And when you create an event on Dataverse, a message is sent to the queue, and external application that subscribes to the service bus queue can retrieve this message and doing operations. I will show that in a minute. This is just to show me that we need, in this case, we have sent a message to Dataverse, but we also need external application able to connect to the Azure Service Bus queue and retrieve the message from the Azure Service Bus queue. And for doing that, Service Bus has a different queuing mechanism. The first is what is called a queue. A queue means that a message is sent to a queue and they can be read and removed in a safe way when someone has processed the message. You can have topics. Topics means that you can one or more listeners can subscribe to a particular message. The sample that I've done before, I'm interested to know accounts. Another is interested to know opportunities, for example. And you can also have other ways, less used way, like one-way and two-way listeners. This means that one-way listener means that a listener is able to consume a message, and if no one is listening, the message is database starts resending the message again with an exponential delay. So this means that it wants a message, a listener connected, and two-way means that the same as one-way, but it also provides the ability to return strings. And REST means that it's exposed as a REST endpoint. So a demo about these scenarios to better understood. I close this. And what I've done here, so this is my plugin registration tool that I show in the slides, just to avoid redoing the steps. As you can see here, I have my service endpoint, and this service endpoint works on the creation of an account, and when something happens, writes to this service bus queue. If I go on Azure, what I have on Azure, sorry, not this page, but this page. What I have on Azure now is a service bus. This service bus has a queue. Sorry, let me go not here, but here. This is my service bus. If I go on queues, this is my queue. This queue now has one message inside the queue. just because I've done previously the creation of an account when testing the Azure function. The data is, I have, as you can see here, I have the two ways active. So I have the service endpoint that talks with Dataverse, with the service bus, and the webhooks that talk with the Azure function. So when I create an account, a message was sent to the Azure function, and now is sent to the Azure Service Bus queue. So that's why I have one message leaving in the service bus. But what I want to do here now, just to show you that it's live, here, I go again on Dataverse, and I create a new account, test2, for example. Let me just write it in this way because it's better to recognize the saving. The data is saved on my Dataverse environment. And, oh, sorry, I will redo that. I want to here we can see that if I refresh, two messages are now on the queue. But what I want to show also is the listener. So what I am creating here. So the service bus scenario, Dataverse sends a message to a service bus. Someone then, an external application, someone then needs to consume this message. And to consume this message, I created here a very simple console application. This console application simply connects by using the Azure Service Bus SDK. It connects to the service bus, creating an object called QClient. And it's simply, I don't want to go into the much details of the C# part, but simply it connects to the service bus queue, this queue passed by here, and retrieves a message and prompts the body of the message. So I can see what Dataverse has triggered to me. So I run this, and you can see that something will be shown to me. So sorry, I placed. I will redo that because I accidentally clicked. Okay, it's here. As you can see, it's a very big JSON, but just to show that I have here the name of the account, and here the account ID, all the context. So I know that this account was created, and obviously I have only filled the code, so I have only the name and the code, but you can also have a lot of other details. And also a lot of other messages like what is the event, and so on. Just to show that it's live. Let me close this. I go into my service bus now, and I refresh. You can see that now I have 0 messages. And now I place again, I run my listener. So my listener is waiting for someone that writes into the service bus. I go here in my Dataverse, and now I create another account called Dataverse Summit 2022, something like this. It's saved. And if I go in my, now the message is sent in Dataverse, and my application has retrieved the message. And here, okay, this is the account name, for example, just to check that it's retrieved. So I have a JSON with the context of the event, and I can do operations. So here I created it on the account creation, but you can create and react to every event. So if an order is posted, if an opportunity is created, if an account is created, is deleted, is something what you want, an external application can take the context and do operations. And obviously, when the application reads the message is removed from the service bus. So As you can see now, I have 0 message pending because my application has removed that. Another quite useful, I think, integration with the serverless platform is exposing entities of an external applications in Dataverse. And the scenario is something like, imagine that I have an application that is running on Azure. This application has, for example, a SQL backend. And I would like to expose elements of these applications that maybe are not simply tables of this database, but maybe are operations of these applications as a virtual tables on Dataverse. What you can do for this is you can also use virtual tables and exposing OData endpoint as virtual tables. And virtual tables can be created from OData data sources. Very quickly to show this, you can go into your administration setting of the Dataverse environment, select a data provider, and so go on data sources, new data source, select OData before data provider, and here you can select your web application, and from this I have a web application that returns OData an OData feed. And when you have done that, come on, mouse, okay, you need to you have a connection. You go on Dataverse, and you need to create a virtual table. The table must be created into the classic interface, so you need to switch to the classic. And from here, you create a new entity. I call it service order because my application here is returning service orders. The scenario is I have an external application that exposes for me an endpoint or data endpoint that permits us to send retrieve service order after an elaboration. So that's the scenarios. And let me only opening, sorry, a URL. This application is just to show you very quickly. Sorry. Come on. Okay, I have this application running on Azure. And if I call this application, this is on data endpoint, and it gives me a feed or data feed. It works because it's a calculation. It's not simply exposing a table. It's a calculation. So that's the scenarios. And the calculation gives me the service object order. So these are JSON objects that are service order, the number of the order, the description, and the start date and end date. And I want to expose that to my Dataverse because I don't want to create custom connectors or something like that. I would like to have this as a table on Dataverse. So that's why I'm creating the connection with your data. I create a new entity called service order. This new entity will be saved on Dataverse, but this new entity is a virtual entity, and this virtual entity is connected to this data source. That is the data source that I previously created by connecting the OData endpoint. So now, when you have that, you need to map each field from your Dataverse table to the external OData endpoint. So you simply map the, for example, the external name is ID, and now I map it with a service order ID and so on. You map that. You can also specify if they are required or not. And you can specify also the data type. And then the result of this is that you have a table that you can see in my Dataverse environment that automatically gives the data from this API. So this is my API now, And if I go into my Dataverse environment, I select tables. I can go on all tables, for example. Let me filter for virtuals. I only want virtual tables. And I have a table called service order. This is the table published. It's a virtual table, and it's connected to my data endpoint. If when it opens, it should display the data that is coming from my external application running on Azure. So I can also select the other fields, but all these fields are coming from an external application running on Azure, and this supports also CRUD operations. So if your data endpoint supports CRUD, so permits also to write, you can also write. And that's quite powerful because all other applications, Power Apps, Canvas, model-driven portals, and more, Dynamics 365 for sales and something like that, can see this as a native table, but this data comes from a data endpoint that comes from an Azure application. And let me jump back to the slides. The last part, we are seeing now Dataverse sending application operations to external application, but I also have the possibility that from an external application, I would like to do something on Dataverse. And something on Dataverse means that I would like to perform quite complex operation. So from Azure Function, for example, you can use the new Power Platform Dataverse client. It's a NuGet package that permits you to perform operation on Dataverse directly from Azure Function or from other applications. And very quickly, simply speaking about this, from an Azure Function, for example, here I'm creating contacts in Dataverse. So I have an external application that can call the Azure Function to create a contact. And obviously, I'm using the contact sample here just to be easy. But imagine that you can also invoke a business process on Dataverse from an external application. And with the Dataverse client, you can, this is an Azure Function code, you can, where you have a startup of the function, where you can register the connection string on your Dataverse environment. And then I am creating a class that contains the first name, the headline name, the last name of the contact that I want to create. And then you can call the directly from the Azure function. This is the create contact Azure function that can create a JSON object. I'm creating a contact entity, and then I'm calling a method, create async of the Dataverse connector that permits me to write operations inside the Dataverse environment directly from the Azure function. And that's quite powerful because you can do also complex operation from Azure functions to Dataverse, and you can extend your business logic by also using all the Azure servers and all the .NET Power. To conclude this, I always remember that extended Dataverse means also analyzing telemetry, especially important for performances, performance monitoring, for troubleshooting, and something like that. So in the Power Platform Admin Center, if you select your Dataverse environment, you click and go on Data Export, and you can select App Insight. So you can create a new data export, selecting App Insight. And when you create a new data export, you can go on, you can export to that data lake or App Insight. App Insight is useful in order to having diagnostics. So you connect your application insight instance, And when you have connected that, you need to select the application inside the instance that you want. Click on create, and now Dataverse starts sending telemetry to your application insights. And from here, you can monitor a lot. You can monitor how Dataverse responds, if it's working good or not, if maybe you have plugins or something like that is not powerful, if you have failures. So you can monitor performances, you can see all your endpoints, plugins, execution, how much they take, you can see the request, and you can also, important in my opinion, see the failures. So if you have the failures, you can see what are the calls that are failures, what are the plugins that are failures, why are failures. You can check the stack trace and something like that. So it's another Azure service that you can use for monitoring a Dataverse environment, and it's quite important if you have integration. If you start extending Dataverse, I think that having application inside connections, it's important because it permits you to have a 36. So a full monitoring of your Dataverse environment. So this ends my presentation of how you can expose and extend the Dataverse environment with Azure services, especially, in my opinion, useful if you have integrations with external application and you want to rely on Dataverse. So thanks for that. If there are some questions, I can try to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Stefano. Yeah, it was a overall like how you can extend Dataverse, and really, really insightful from Azure Functions to Service Bus to webhooks. It was really great to see all those things that you have presented. There are a few questions. So I want to go with the first question from Ravi. How does Azure Service Bus compares to MuleSoft?
MuleSoft, Azure Service Bus is a service that running on Azure, and it permits to create an integration platform built on Azure, on the Azure service, and built on queues, triggers, and so on. MuleSoft is for what I know about MuleSoft, is a third-party integration platform. I honestly don't know MuleSoft, how it works. So I don't think it's native. I think that it has a lot of similarities with the Azure Service Bus, but it's not native. So if you want to use MuleSoft or something like that with Dataverse, you need to create something custom. Azure Service Bus is instead, as you have seen here, natively integrated into Dataverse, because if you have remembered the slides, I don't do nothing with customization. I simply open the plugin registration tool, and from here I simply register what is called a service endpoint, and a service endpoint permits me to specify a service bus. So I think that for the few part that I know about MuleSoft, it has a lot of similarities, but Azure Service Bus relies on Azure, so you can. It's built on the platform. You can all the power of the platform and so on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So yeah, so the next question is from Kokulan. If we register a step in asynchronous mode, and if the webhook handler throws an exception, will the whole transaction be rolled back in the Dataverse?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, but then isn't the transaction happening outside, because this is already transferred over to Azure Functions, and Azure Functions is doing the transaction? Would it still roll back?
If the plugin is, I don't. Let me try to, if I understood the so if the transaction is rolled back in terms of if you create an entity and for example, like my sample, like if I create an entity and I have a webhook registered here, if when you create an entity, the event is sent to the Azure function, and if this fails, this communication fails, the transaction is rolled back. Obviously, the transaction is not rolled back if you receive the event and then your Azure function fails. So if you receive the event and you, during the process of your event, your Azure function fails, the event is not rolled back.
Okay, but then if the handoff is happened between Dataverse and Azure functions, then it won't roll back, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So during the handoff, if it runs into exception, then it rolls back. That's the answer.
Exactly.
Okay, I think so. We are already on time. So Stefano, if you wanna just hang around and then try to answer some of the questions, there were really interesting questions from Yogesh and a few other people.
Yes.
So if you wanna just hang around and then try to answer those questions.
I can answer offline if we are out of time, so we can go move leave the space to the other and can answer in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat is what I was referring to. Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, the next presenter.
Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye bye.